Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What an interesting kind of juxtaposition here. You've got this billionaire, the founder of this Patagonia company, basically just going, yep, giving the company away. Giving the $3 billion company, just giving it away. Going to give it to a pair of trusts with the mandate that, well, all of their profits, about $100 million a year, go specifically to fighting climate change. You go, whoa, socially responsible businesses can't exist. You know, people who care about somebody else, the next generation, the future, a legacy. And this is what I've been saying about the very wealthy. You know, Bezos could have a legacy, really could. He could have a legacy of being the greatest human in the history of humanity. Using his wealth in a much more, well, useful way, other than shooting, phallic-looking rockets up into space. Could have a much bigger role in the future of humanity. I don't know, figuring out how to do some stuff around saving the planet, helping rebuild a prosperous working class so people have hope and opportunity and unite the country together. Yeah, no, it's just easier to shoot phallic things, well, into places. Yeah. Now, I take that because this is where you go, oh, there's hope. There is hope. There's some hope that maybe, humanity's not all ugly. And then I look at the reality of, the stories coming out today. And I've been spending a lot of time looking at the potential of a rail strike on Friday or a lockout. Don't know which way this is going. But rail service stopping across the country. And look, as someone who spends a lot of time in the rail yards, I know nobody who works in them is happy because they're overworked, they're underpaid, they're underappreciated, it's a tough, dangerous job. And you have the rail barons who are wildly, wildly profitable. And yet the jobs, they're not that great. It's not even, look, working people aren't asking to make a killing. They just want to make a living. They just want to make ends meet. They just want life to get better. They want opportunity. And what's interesting to me is I look at someone like Warren Buffett, who famously said, it's class warfare, and my class is winning. But we shouldn't be. Understanding that the vast majority of us support workers and support an economy that works for all and a tax code. Even Buffett talks about this. It's insane that he pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. But yet, here we are in this moment that, the Buffett investor class is winning this class war. And why is that? Well, because of just how easy it is to divide you and me and we in the working class. How easy it is to pit us against each other and create these fires of us, looking at our neighbors with a side eye. And I'm looking at the news reports. I'm looking at how it's being presented. I'm looking at what Republicans are proposing. And look, there are some Democrats who are quietly saying, maybe we should force those people not to go on strike or just shove that contract that the Presidential Emergency Board proposed, shove that down their throat, just jam it right down their throat, make them, because, hey, they have the power to do that. We're in this moment where we in the working class they're throwing us propaganda. And that propaganda is to be angry at those employees, at those workers, the people we used to call frontline heroes, the people we used to call essential. You remember them? Yeah, I know you remember them. We're supposed to be angry at them because, well, what do they want? Now, mainstream media throwing out, they got the Presidential Emergency Board was going to give them a huge raise, 24% increase over the life of the contract. They're going to get $1,000 bonus. They're going to get all the issue's not money, man. The issue is not money here. The issue is, can you get a day off? And it comes back to that frame. An old Romanian guy I used to know. He always said, am I here to? I came to this country so I could work. I could work to live. I came from a place where I lived to work, and that's a real important distinction. These people want to be able to work to live. They want to be able to put a roof over their kid's head, put food on the table, opportunities for them, all that stuff. The things that we all want. The reason we all go to work. These folks, these engineers and these conductors, they don't get that. They don't get days off. And I think this is where a real explanation has to happen in the working conditions of these folks. Because again, as I say, people unionize and people bargain and strike and all that stuff over wages, hours, conditions. Conditions being, in this day right now, the most important part of all of these discussions. These are people who do not have a day off. Nothing. You go, but Rick, they're, we need them on the job. Yeah, we do. And if they're sick and if they die, we don't have them either. This is one of those things where understanding their conditions. Walk with me, if you will, because I actually know a little bit about this. I was on call myself for 11 years. But we had, after so many days, you had time off. They don't get any guaranteed time off. So 30 days a month, 12 months a year, 365 days in that year, they're waiting for a phone to ring, whether it's at home or in a hotel 1,000 miles from home. They're waiting for that phone. And this is what the rail industry has built their profitability on the lives of people who are sacrificing so that their kids and their future can be better. And I don't think you should have to sacrifice one for the other, especially in this day of technological advance. Now, understand, like I said, I spend a lot of time in rail yards. Antiquated equipment. The technology, when you talk to these people, the technology is years old. In this day and age, you really want me to believe that you can't schedule somebody within a couple of hour block? And as profitable as the rail system is, you can't absorb that minor cost so that people can have lives, so that people can plan to go to their kids' soccer game once in a while, so people can go to their kids' weddings at some point, a doctor appointment, any of that. This is what this is about. This is about dignity. This is about life-work balance. Don't be distracted by, they're just greedy. It's not about the greed. But what we're going to be sold, and this is the important part, and this is where Republicans in the Senate, today you're trying to ram through a mandate that they have to take the Presidential Emergency Board's recommendations. Richard Burr of North Carolina, Roger Wicker of Mississippi, they want to move through and do it quickly on a resolution to require railroad workers to accept the labor deal. You have to do it. And this is Republican world. This is you want to know the difference between the two? You want to know the difference between Democrats and Republicans? This is a huge one. Because Republicans don't want workers to have rights. You will do what you're told, when you're told, how you're told, and you have nothing. Because understand, in most states, like mine in Pennsylvania, the employer-employee relationship is still that of master and servant. Once you cross that threshold into the employer's realm, you are theirs. They can make you do just about anything, as long as it's not against the law, because we do have some laws, few, but some. But you're basically their property. And we've got Republican senators right now going, we're gonna take the only right that working people have away. The only right that we as workers have is the right to fold our arms and march our feet. The right to not work, to withhold our labor. And they're saying, no, we're going to take that away from you. Even if you're not a union member, even if you're not in the railroad, and look, and if you're like me, worried what this is going to do to the economy, and I'm sure the White House is worried what this is going to do to the economy, We as working people in this moment can send a message to the investor class, because what the big money people are planning on is that we're going to attack the workers, that we're going to eat each other. And again, this isn't right-left. This isn't Democrat-Republican as much as this is up-down. This is the people in their ivory towers, the CEOs in their boardrooms and the penthouses dictating the terms of someone's life that they don't even know, just a number on a balance sheet. And this is where you and me, we can send them a message and say, no, we won't be divided. We're not going to buy the nonsense. Every worker should have dignity. Every worker should have the ability to work to live, not live to work. And that's what this is about. So if someone says, well, they get paid really well, so they're going to have, no, it's not about the money. It's not the money. It's the time off. It's the time with family. And ask yourself, I mean, seriously, ask yourself. Let's say you made double the wages you make now. Would it be worth missing every birthday, missing every football game, every baseball game, every event, every concert? Would it be worth missing your entire child's growing up, missing your spouse? I've always said, and look, I've been in the trucking business a bunch of years. I've always believed that if you're not at home keeping your side of the bed warm, somebody will be. Think of the number of broken families because, hey, there's you're tethered to this company. Is that worth it? And I know people say, well, they can quit. Yeah, they don't like it. They can go somewhere else. And that's such a defeatist mentality. As where my idea is, how about we make things better so no one has to endure the kind of struggle and the kind of abuse that this is. This is abuse. And the union finally is stepping forward. The workers are finally saying enough. And in this moment, after the pandemic, after showing up through all of what happened through there, and then being told how wonderful they were, they're saying, hey, we want to be treated as such. And we want a day off so we can take care of ourselves. We can take care of our children. We can take care of our families. Is that too much to ask? So if a strike happens or if a lockout happens because the Buffetts of the world demand it, when things get tough, remember this, because it's not the workers. No worker wants to go on strike. But if it means that you're going to be able to right a wrong, you do it. And you follow it through to the end. And I'll tell you, I'm with these miners, or these railroad workers, and the miners down in Alabama, and the workers across this country doing it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Right back.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, the interesting news in Congress, New Jersey Representative Josh Gottheimer and Republican Representative from Michigan, Fred Upton, they've unfurled some legislation titled the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act. Yes, that is a mouthful. But the idea is maybe no more coup attempts. Maybe we, all of the things that were attempted during the end of the Trump era, maybe we don't do that in the future. We'll see where it goes. They're saying it's bipartisan. I got to find out how many Republicans other than Fred Upton signed on to this. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, the coup attempt and maybe how we stop that in the future. I've asked Jeff Timmer to come talk with us. He's a political strategist and a senior advisor with the folks over at the Lincoln Project. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
We always love having you. So what do you make of this? This is not the first anti-coup attempt bill, but it's the latest. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think their heart is in the right place. Fred Upton, somebody I've known for a long time. I've known Fred for nearly 30 years, and I think he's one of the good ones. It's unfortunate that Congress is losing somebody like Fred. He's one of the, there's going to be fewer Republicans like Liz Cheney and Fred Upton and more like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz. But I guess my fear is that as often is the case with Congress, some of the efforts are too little, too late, or not enough. And that's what I fear with something like this, is that the threat that we're facing, that democracy is facing, that the country is facing from these people, these MAGA Republicans, these America Firsters, these full fascists, I don't even want to give them the semi-fascist title, they are so hell-bent on their efforts to undermine faith in democracy, to tip the scales of the election mechanism, the counting of votes in their favor, even if they don't get the majority of votes, that I don't know that something like this will necessarily stop their efforts to undermine democracy. Now, it might cause them to divert and re-strategize and look at the presidency and the electoral college differently, but it's not going to stop the demons that they've let out, that have been unleashed since 2020, that are working their way into the precinct level of the way elections are run. And that's something that we've been seeing across the country, is getting people implanted, embedded into these, right down to the precinct level where the people go in to vote, getting these MAGA election deniers, these people who have said they will, their loyalty is to Donald Trump, not the oath that they take or the rule of law or the Constitution or anything. And these people are going to be by the hundreds or thousands scattered throughout the country.
No, and that's frightening. And look, in my state where I live here in Pennsylvania, we got a guy running for governor who has said that if they don't like the results, they should just set it aside.
Yeah, it's insane. It really is. It's 240 plus years of the American Republic, through all of the good and all of the bad, has managed to maintain this peaceful transition of power, this faith in the democratic process, regardless of your partisanship. Partisans can fight fiercely during campaigns. When the votes are counted, somebody wins, somebody loses. The loser accepts defeat and goes on to fight the next election. That's what's always happened until 2020, when we had the first violent transfer of power and the first denial of the outcome of the election. And now that has become commonplace, and we're going to see it in 2022, and we'll see it in 2024.
Yeah, I had a Republican friend say that this is the result of 20 years of participation trophies, and because there are no losers anymore. So the Republicans who lose, Trump lost. It's that simple. That they won't admit it. They won't fess up to it. And there's no, and they're poor sports. I mean, this is 20 years of poor sportsmanship come to a head. He was what he was saying.
Yeah, well, there's a divide within the Republican Party. There's a small group of people who believe the nonsense, who actually believe the talking points about the election was stolen, that there was fraud, and Donald Trump is the legitimately elected president. That's a small number. Most of the people know that it's all insane, it's all a lie, that it's all made up to placate the base, to fuel the outrage that we've seen, that keeps them motivated to punch above their weight when it comes to turnout in elections. And I think those people are even worse than the crazy ones who believe it, because they're cynically manipulating the process to maintain their own power. They're risking the entire American experiment as a result of it. It really is. It took one election They say democracy is only as safe as the next election. Well, we saw how close we came in 2020. I know how close we are in 2022, and I fear for 2024.
No, it's an excellent point you make. There's one thing about being a true believer and believing that you're fighting the good fight, and there's another thing of you just sold your soul for a couple of pennies. And for the power that comes along with abusing that. I see where you're going, but my problem is, I used to believe that there were good Republicans left, and that there was the soul of the Republican Party that was still there. But I'm looking at these election results where these crazy people are running for Secretary of State, and they got it through the primaries. There were election deniers have gotten through the primaries. You got the governor's race. What was it, New Hampshire? Now it got a crazy guy. I would love to believe that there are still good, decent, honest, hardworking conservatives who believe in those principles of the Eisenhower, even Reagan era. I'm just struggling to see the results, Jeff.
Yeah, well, they don't. There are so few of them that they could be in a museum. There are people like Fred Upton that we talked about at the top of the segment here. There are people like Liz Cheney. There are some, but they've been forced out of the party. The cancer has spread, it's metastasized, it infects every cell of the Republican body now, and even those who in the way they live their lives, and even in the way they conduct their own personal political business, they're not part of this MAGA routine, but they enable it either through passivity or through going along just enough to maintain their own positions. And that has the same effect of being, full. They might as well have been there on January 6th, those people that go along with it. Because they are corrupting and corroding the faith, the shared faith in democracy, and it only works if we all, at the end of the day, no matter what we believe, what our ideology is, what our policy differences are, what our value differences are, if the one shared things that Americans have is that we accept the results of our elections, and if we stop doing that, the whole experiment is over.
It all falls apart. I'm with you there. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Jeff Timmer, political strategist, senior advisor with the Lincoln Project. Make sure you check out his podcast as well. He's the co-host of the A Republic podcast. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Now, what's interesting is you bring up a point that I agree with you 100% on. It's about the sanctity of the ballot box. If we can't accept that, the results that come out of the voice of we the people, we've got nothing. But again, you've got people who are saying, but Jeff, it was stolen. The election was stolen. They ripped it. They robbed us. And yet what's interesting to me is the very people who are pointing their fingers saying they stole it are the very people who are trying. And I looked at this story coming out of Albany, New York, where you've got this Republican county board elections commissioner from, Rensselaer County, who looked like he was going to be stuffing ballots. He had absentee ballots and used information for 8 voters without their permission. Is that not a problem?
It's a problem, and so many of. First of all, there's so little actual fraud that happens in our elections, but anecdotally, all the fraud that we seem to have since the 2020 election and since seems to be these cases of these MAGA Republican Donald Trump lovers committing the fraud. I have yet to find a story about somebody who wasn't filling out their dead wife's ballot so that Donald Trump could get the extra vote, or like this guy in New York. And it really is, it's a case where you have a group of arsonists running around saying, look, everybody, there's fires everywhere. We need more firefighters. We need to do more things to stop the spread of the fires as we're running around setting the fires. And so we have the arsonists are the ones screaming about the fires. And that's what the Republicans are doing with election integrity, election fraud, all these bills to restore the public's faith in elections. The only reason the public doesn't have faith in the elections is because of the Republicans and their nonstop propaganda that is all lies about the 2020 election.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. So I guess the last line of question then goes: is there anything we can do about this? I mean, There have been stories. I mean, yesterday the story of Lindell, the pillow guy, got stopped at a Hardee's, and the FBI took his cell phone because there's some investigations going on. In fact, my favorite line of all of today was the FBI may have more cell phones than Verizon, as they've got my Congressman Scott Perry's cell phone, they've got Rudy Giuliani's phone, they've got Lindell's, they've got this Boris Yepstein, Mike Roman. They've got a whole bunch of these people's cell phones because they were recording their treason. I think I find it interesting.
Enter promo code MyPrison. The way to combat this is, one, there needs to be accountability. The people, there has to be a penalty. Even though the coup didn't work, it was a deliberate attempt. It was a conspiracy to overthrow a fair democratic election. There needs to be accountability. That's first. But the thing we have to remember, and all your listeners and viewers need to know, is there are more of us than there are of them. There might seem like a lot of them, but it is not half the country. It's not half the country believes this. They are a small, squealing minority who are making noise above the size of their contribution to the electorate. But the danger is that they wear us down with their crazy. Crazy it's nonstop. It goes 24/7. They don't need to sleep. Sane people get weary of this. They're just out living their lives, trying to make. They don't live and breathe politics the way that we might. But people need to vote. They need to know their vote matters. They need to get involved. Give $5, $10, whatever you can afford to a candidate that's going to protect democracy. I'll tell this as a former Republican. If you're a Republican, you need to vote for a Democrat. There are no Republicans who are going to protect democracy. You need to put your country above the party.
No, I mean, we're in one of those moments. Look, I used to have a lot of Republicans that I would have conversations with, and we had good spirited conversations because I think we all wanted the same things. We just had different ideas on how you get to those places. And I don't feel that way anymore, Jeff. I don't feel that we have that common bond with, you say a squealing minority, but somehow they keep putting people into office, and it appears this election that there's some problems.
Oh, there's risk. There's risk that people like Doug Mastriano can win, and become governor of Pennsylvania, that Tudor Dixon can get elected governor of Michigan, that Kerry Lake can get elected governor of Arizona. That's the risk. And I think we need to be alarmed. We need to be out there saying in these next 56 days, everybody worry. Vote early. If you're in an early vote state, if you can vote absentee or by mail, get your vote in. Make sure your family and friends vote. Convince them what's at stake here. It's not hyperbolic to say that democracy is hanging by a thread, and this is the most important election, certainly the most important midterm election that we've had in this country.
No, and I throw this out to people. I just had a guy tell me, well, I vote in every presidential election. I go, yeah, that's great. These are the really important ones. These are the ones that affect your life more directly than even the presidential election. This is the one you should be voting in. The midterms, the off-year elections, those are just as important. Voting is not a bystander sport. You got to democracy is not a spectator sport. You got to get in there and participate.
Yep, we get the government we deserve, and so we need to get out there, put an emphasis on what we want.
Good stuff. Jeff, I appreciate the time. Always good to talk with you.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Jeff Timmer. Make sure you check out his podcast, A Republic Podcast. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Democracies function on the principle that the losing side concedes defeat and the winning side.
I agree with that.
Takes over
when you lose.
Trump won, Biden's illegitimate.
This is 100% evidence.
There's no one that's done more for Christianity than Donald Trump.
Americans remember how good we had it under President Trump.
I mean, MAGA, let's face it,
had one bad day.
You can call us extremists, you can call us domestic terrorists. You know who else was called a lot of names his whole life? Jesus.
In Washington, D.C., the problem is there's not enough of me.
21 years ago, the threat was jihadis armed with box cutters and mace. Today, it's one of America's two political parties. It's the Democrat Party and their henchmen.
It was the worst day of my life. And in some ways, you know, the greatest day of my life.
I'm hugging it and petting it. Oh.
Ron Johnson's going to win. We've invested with him
He's
early.
behind
He
by
needed that
about
early.
5 points right now, right?
Yeah.
Everybody says you're going to lose, but you don't lose. You're going to win. That's what they always say. You're going to be fine. All right?
It's the gay, porno, abortion, feminist, diabolic empire. That's what America stands for.
Your critics say it wasn't appropriate to call out a man who just suffered a stroke for your campaign to question his eating habits. I'm just clarifying you stand by with the campaign statements.
Yes. I have not yet begun to fight.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So on Monday, we had Tom Hartman, the radio host on the program, talking about his new book that's come out. And he made a comment one comment that got the most attention, especially from my MAGA hat wearing friends. He said that you look at states like Wyoming and Montana and some of those western states that at one point had been blue, but during the Reagan era forward, people bought talk radio, and those states have become solidly not just red, but really kind of crazy red. And he said basically, look, it's because of this. And boy, the hat folks really unhappy. And the reality is that's what happened. They started talking to people, presenting what Trump would call the alternative realities, and now they live in their whole other world with their own media that spews nonsense. For instance, I think right now the Biden administration is absolutely killing it. But if you look at what our news media is throwing out at us, it's all bad. And this is why we need local media. We need local control of media. And we need, people who are going to actually tell the truth. And that's why I've asked my next guest, Tara McGowan, to come talk with us. She's the co-founder of Courier Newsroom. There are folks across states across the country doing just that, some local reporting. Tara, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick. It's great to be here.
So, I want to start with this point that Hartman made, and I absolutely agree with. In fact, I've made it for a very long time, watched it happen, in lunchrooms that I've been in over the years. We used to have information, and that information was widely trusted. And, the end of the fairness doctrine, you end up having these moneyed interests on the extreme right presenting and talking to people with information that, little sketchy in my view.
That's right. It's, information and good information, factual information is the lifeblood of democracy. And what we have seen is an increasing deployment of misinformation and disinformation and straight up lies by right-wing media in this country, whether it's on talk radio, whether it's online, through pink slime fake news sites that have popped up all over this country that use AI-driven content to be able to manipulate and sow confusion in folks, and it's had real-world impacts. We've seen that in everything from the lack of adoption and mistrust in the vaccines during the pandemic, which over-indexed in Republican-led states in this country, as did deaths from the pandemic, to, of course, what we saw as the siege in the Capitol, all from folks that believed and were mobilized around a very, very big lie that had no evidence to back it up. So this is it's a real crisis in this country and around the world today.
But if you judge, what I read in the mainstream corporate-controlled media, and especially in the right-wing echo chamber, which more and more they seem to be, kind of in the same world now. You would think everything's horrible. The sky's falling, the end of humanity. The sliced bread that was wonderful is now moldy. You would think it was horrible, and yet, I'm looking at the fact that we're talking about reshoring manufacturing. We're rebuilding our infrastructure. We're talking about creating good family-sustaining jobs. There's so much in this moment to be excited about, and yet all that keeps being led with is division and hatred.
That's right, and there's a lot of layers to this problem too. I don't want to reduce it to the right wing media and the disinformation machine is a huge problem and a culprit. But to your point, mainstream media and traditional media outlets are not doing their jobs anymore. They have business model incentives that have them focusing on people who already want good information and news and who are more elite and coastal, and at the real detriment of reaching the mass public in this country. They're not evolving their models to reach people where they get their information, which is predominantly online and on social media, for better and for worse. And they're focused on people who are paying consumers. And so that's also added to the information gap and crisis in this country, is that people live in real good information deserts, but they don't live in information deserts because everyone, for the most part, has access in some way or another to the internet. And that's where information moves the most readily and the fastest. And that's also the biggest difference, right, in our society today, is that we no longer have a centralized media. We no longer have a few trusted channels and voices that everyone was getting their information from. Whether that information was biased or not, everyone was relying on the same local evening news television anchors or newspapers of record to get their information. And with the internet and social media, everybody picks and chooses or passively takes in what is fed to them through algorithms. And so because of that, we really do have a really big vacuum that is being filled by this trash, if you will. And it's really a difficult thing to counter, but we can't rely any longer, as I think Democrats and progressives did for a really long time, on that mainstream traditional media to do the bidding of facts and truth. They have different incentives, and they're simply just they're not up to the task any longer. We've seen the results of that.
No, and look, I blame Democrats for a lot of things.
One of them I do too.
One of us, they didn't compete in the talk radio space at the beginning when they should have. And it's, I look at Hartman's comments that I have made myself over the years, and I think a lot of people have, that we stop talking to rural communities, especially rural communities. Democrats stop talking to them, and I don't know why, because the policies that they push and the things that they want to do actually benefit rural communities much more than what conservatives do, but yet you wouldn't know it based on what's being presented.
That's right. And where the right has an agenda and an incentive, right? They don't want people to have that information about what government is doing good for you and your family and your community if that government is led by Democrats. The other side, the media that doesn't have a bias towards one or the other or claims not to, they have an incentive to keep things controversial or to stoke controversy. They don't have an incentive to talk about what government does well because it doesn't drive clicks or traffic. It doesn't drive controversy. That's part of the problem. Like, we need a media that is incentivized by the good of providing good information to people, so we have an informed, participating electorate and strong democracy in this country, to be incentivized because of those reasons to talk about the good that government is doing when it does good. It doesn't mean being in their bag. It doesn't mean to be in their corner or be their puppet. It's getting the facts across, because when government does good things like this administration has done, like Democrats in the Senate have done by passing the Inflation Reduction Act, passing the CHIPS Act, passing the American Rescue Plan that saved small businesses across this country and put shots in millions of people's arms, that is information that is empowering. People need that information, and they're getting so much disinformation or lack of this information because there aren't more models and more news organizations really prioritizing it.
No, you're absolutely right. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Tara McGowan, co-founder of Career Newsroom. Make sure you check out their website, careernewsroom.com, and all of the states that have newsrooms, like our state here in Pennsylvania, the Keystone. When we do our tour here in October, we'll be leaning on a number of those newsrooms across states like Wisconsin's Up North News, the Gander in Michigan, and also the Starting Line out in Iowa. Looking forward to dealing with those folks. Now, you were the big signing yesterday of the Inflation Reduction Act. You were there, right?
I was very fortunate to be invited to the White House celebration because of the work that I and so many of my team members and colleagues and friends did to get Joe Biden into office by spreading good information and factual information about Trump and his administration's failures and corruption in the lead up to the 2020 election. So it was a really wonderful moment to just pause and reflect. No one got to celebrate that enormous feat and victory when it happened because of the pandemic, and so it was a lovely thing for the White House to do for everyone who helped make that happen, and to celebrate it for everyone across the country who really made it happen by showing up to vote.
Yeah, now I look at this piece of legislation as something very important. It's going to set us in a direction to deal with a little bit. Now, it's never enough. I wanted much bigger, much chunkier, much more visionary, but we got what you can get. And this is moving us to deal with climate. And I look at this administration. Like I said, we're bringing back manufacturing, and more factory starts than I can remember in any time in my life. And yet, I go back to the Trump years. He talked a lot about infrastructure week every week. We got cute pictures of him driving trucks and playing with toys. He talked about reshoring manufacturing. Did a lot of talking. A lot of talking.
A lot of tweeting, a lot of talking, not a lot of policy making or action.
And here we are, the guy who's struggling to really talk, doing the work that needs to be done. And for me, that's what I want. I want a guy who's not going to say a lot, but is going to get things done. And I think we're in a moment, Tara. We're at kind of a crossroads moment. Do we want to go back to talking about doing something, or do we want to actually do it? And I think this is an important moment.
Yeah, government has to do things for people to believe in and trust government and to participate in our democracy. And that's what this administration does. They have gotten more done than any administration in my lifetime. And it's been under 2 years. And the American people need to know that, and they need to know what it means for them, not just how it got there, the sausage making process, the votes, et cetera. And they need to know who voted for these measures that are going to better their lives and who didn't. Not one single Republican voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act, the most historic climate change legislation we've had in this country. It's going to bring down the costs of prescription drugs in this country, and it's paid for by taxing wealthy corporations. This is what the American people want. The Biden administration and Democrats have delivered on it, and now that information needs to get to the American people. And that's exactly why we started Courier Newsroom, because the media is not doing its job.
No, and this is, again, one of these moments where I think there needs to be much more attention spent on what this administration is actually doing, other than the hyperbole we get out of the right wing, that the sky is falling, it's the end of the world. And maybe for them it is, because I'm hoping we're ending neoliberalism. I'm hoping we're ending all of those bad policies that destroyed that American dream that my grandparents' generation built. And I think we have to have that education process of exactly what happened. You go back to that supply side voodoo Reaganomic era of we're going to give the wealthy everything they could possibly want, and maybe something will fall out of it. Maybe something will trickle down. And I tell you, I've been trickled on enough, but it ain't the rivers of gold and honey that I was told it was going to be.
No, that's exactly right. It's a trickle, if anything at all. And until a crisis strikes, right, and the government needs to act and nobody gets in the way of it, because we have to solve for a crisis, do we actually see things get done? And I think we're really turning a corner on that. And there was just research that came out the other day that I saw that showed when people know what this administration has done, they are supportive of it. It is when they don't access that information. It's when they're hearing lies, when they're hearing ideological driven narratives by the right that are just there to try to put Biden and Democrats down to be able to win elections on the right. And look what their alternative they're presenting. We have extremists running the Republican Party in this country, people who want to take away the rights of millions of women and families, obstruct measures that are going to put money in people's pockets and jobs in people's communities, that's going to save this planet from the crisis that we're already witnessing. It's just, the contrast is so unbelievably stark. It's no longer hyperbole. We're living through witnessing and experiencing what they want to take away and what their agenda is on the extreme right. And then we have an administration and Democrats in Congress that are actually doing something for the American people. So we no longer have to talk about the visions or the platforms and how they're different. It's actually the actions, not the words.
Yeah, and for those people who go, wow, they're all the same. No, they're not all the same.
They're not.
The thing that's always amazed me is I have Republican friends who vote for politicians who tell them that government is bad, government can't do anything, government's broken, and then they elect them to prove that, yeah, we can break government, we can not do anything, we can gridlock, we can do all of this stuff, and then we can allow the wealthy to come in, swoop up, and, well, cash in.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, that is the surest and fastest way to authoritarianism in this country and fascism in this country is if we stop believing in embedding our government and our institutions and we let bad actors take the reins and we trust only them and listen to only them. And that is exactly the agenda of the extreme right in this country. That is what they want. And that is what they are confusing and lying to and manipulating so many people in this country to believe is that they're going to do right by them when really all they're looking for is unfettered control and not to do anything good with it.
Yeah, and this is where messaging is so important and good information. The kind of work that you're doing, I think, is so important. So you talked a moment ago, and that's where I kind of want to finish up with this. You talked a moment ago about business models. And, when you think about, messaging, you think about media, you think about information, in news, you're not thinking about the business part of this. And I think that's an important, as you're filtering through what's being presented, I think that's a huge part of it, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. And honestly, that's another crisis that we have in this country. We know this because local news is shuttering all over this country because they weren't able to evolve their business models. Their advertising revenue that they relied on for generations was tanked by the rise of platforms like Facebook and Google that really cannibalized the advertising industry with nothing to save them. We don't have sustainable media models in this country. We don't have government-funded media at scale the way other countries do. We need to find more diversified, sustainable models. We need people to invest in good information and journalism for it to exist. So that is something that I think about all the time. We built Courier in a model that relies, yes, on investors that we're transparent about, but also it's going to rely over time to keep existing on the people in the communities, to keep it alive, to read it, to consume the videos, the information that we push out on social media every day, where most people are, and to invest, to pay back into this model, never needing to. We don't want paywalls, but to believe that this is a civic utility, this is necessary for us to have all of the things we want, to have nice things like healthcare and jobs and an economy that actually helps lift up the middle class in this country instead of diminish it the way that right-wing and neoliberal policies have done, as you mentioned.
Great stuff. I hope folks will check out the website, couriernewsroom.com. We'll get links out on social media. You can find your state and your local news. All good stuff, Tara McGowan. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you so much for all you do, Rick. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Remember, you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Share with your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. They might learn something. Back after this.
I took 2 years of electric in high school, and I was the only girl in the class there. Here, I'm the only girl as far as installers go. I'm a single mom, too. I joined the union because it gave me options for health care and life insurance so that I know my son's taken care of. I like what I do. This is the best job I've ever had. You think solar panels is more like California. You wouldn't think Appalachia would have any. It would be smart if the government would invest more in clean energy resources.
Calling all builders. Your country is calling you. Tackling climate change is the job of our lifetime. It's time to build back better. Let's get to work.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So I got this email, and it's one of these things that it's quite remarkable. So I get this email, and it's from a group called the Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust. They're the fact people. I love the Orwellian kind of, we're the fact people. And the kind of tone deafness that this email kind of threw at me. Because here in Pennsylvania, there's a Senate race going on between John Fetterman, the Democratic lieutenant governor, and the TV pitchman, Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz, really wealthy guy. I mean, lives in mansions. In fact, was asked, how many houses he had. He said like 2. He had 10. Mansions, big places, millions of dollars. John Fetterman lives in one of the poorer communities in this state, in Braddock, Pennsylvania, and went there, became mayor. It did all kind of incredible work to help poor people. I mean, the difference in personality and direction could not be greater. But the fact people, they're upset because evidently they're claiming that Fetterman didn't list his assets properly. Because they claim he's got real estate assets, and that these assets he should have reported, and they listed them, and the addresses and stuff. And I don't know, I kind of have a problem with that a little bit, listing people's addresses. But when they put the assessed value of the properties, I'm like, really? This is what you're bickering over? Not the guy who's got the mansions that he didn't know about? But the most valuable asset that Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, property-wise, owns is assessed at $41,500, all the way down to a property that's worth assessed value of $700. So most of them are in the $8,000-$10,000 range. And what it is he bought up property around his home and bought up property, I would assume, for at some point to do something, community-wise, because that's where his mind is at. But they're claiming you had to claim this because these are massive assets. And you go, no, you claim real estate assets, if you're making money off of them, and they're not. These are just properties that he owns, and it's public record. It's not like it was anything nefarious. And this is one of those weird moments. They're trying to make a big deal out of, look how wealthy he is. He has all these properties. And I know